At long last, I finally own you. The Sony A7III. I've waited to add you to my arsenal for so long. Oh, hello. Well, this is awkward. Cue the intro. Well, what about you guys? What's the crack? How you all doing? I hope you're keeping well today. Hope everything's good where you are. Hope you're not as muggy as I am over here because it is so humid here in Northern Ireland. So forgive me if I'm dripping with sweat throughout this video. But yes, I hope you're all keeping well today. So yes, I can now finally say that after waiting for so long, I have finally added the Sony A7III to my photography arsenal. I have waited to get this camera for a very long time. I've saved up every single penny and I finally bit the bullet this year and got it. So before I had this here, I have of course the Sony A7II, which I'm keeping as my backup camera, but I had the M50, the Canon M50 Mark I, and I had to say goodbye to that little camera. It was great for video, but I just needed to just finally get into complete Sony full frame mirrorless. So yes, I'm keeping the A7II. That's my backup camera and what I'm currently recording on at the moment. And my A7III is my main camera. And this is the reason why I wanted to do this video, because the A7II is still available to buy alongside with the A7III. And I'm sure you're probably sitting there wondering, well, what exactly is the big difference? What will spending more money get me compared to just going for something a little bit more affordable? Well, I'm going to talk about some of those things today and sort of cover some of the things that really attract out to me, and hopefully maybe by the end of this video it can help you maybe decide which camera you've been thinking about if you've been on the fence between any of these two guys. I haven't been sponsored by Sony in this video. This is just my own overall honest opinion about some gears that I own. But if you do want to make any purchases, I have some Amazon affiliate links down below. There's no additional charges into whenever you're buying, but I get a small commission for every purchase, and those commissions just help me keep supporting the channel. And of course, while you're down there, don't be afraid to like, share, subscribe, hit the wee bell icon. All these things just help me push out more and more content for you guys, and I'm always greatly appreciated that you come and watch the videos. So yeah, I've more or less gone through all three iterations of the A7 range. I haven't owned the R, and I haven't owned the S, and I most definitely haven't owned the A1. But I have started off with the A7 Mark I, moved into the A7II, and now I'm on the A7III. The Mark I was a great camera to start off with. It's what introduced us to full frame mirrorless, especially at such an affordable price. And when the A7II came out, there was a few more additional features that were involved, primarily in body stabilization with a full frame mirrorless camera. Then the A7III came out and it just completely wiped the floor off all the other cameras in terms of what all this can do. But just because this can do so much doesn't mean that the A7II or anything isn't a great camera. But I just want to sort of cover some key differences of what is beneficial to me. So starting off, the one thing that I really wanted the A7III for was just to have a much more improvement on the autofocus. The autofocus on this camera is outstanding. A7II's autofocus is still really good. I've still been able to use that for continuous low light, music photography and all that, but you don't have as much of an area on your phase detection, whereas you have a much more bigger phase detection on the A7III. Plus you also start to bring in the famous eye autofocus, which is continuous, so they can follow along with the eye if the subject is moving around or anything, whereas you can still get eye autofocus on the A7II, but it's only in single shoots. So if they move, you have to then refocus and all like that, whereas for the A7 it's just so snappy, so quick, it's so precise. I've done a couple of shoots with this here, and especially with using the eye autofocus, and it is just unreal. Once it locks onto the eye, it just stays there and it's amazing. And especially whenever I couple it up with the Viltrox 85mm 1.8, that lens and this camera is just a perfect combination for me. So yeah, the autofocus was what I really wanted this camera for, so just to have a much more better improvement on it. Especially, I don't do a lot of AFC or just continuous tracking or anything, whereas I feel a lot more comfortable with doing that sort of thing with the A7III. So yeah, autofocus was the biggest thing as to why I wanted this camera. The next biggest thing that made the A7III stand out compared to all the others is the battery life. No longer are you using that little piddly FW50 battery. You now have a much more bigger battery which has double the lifespan on it, because, like, don't get me wrong, the FW50 battery, it was okay. It's not as bad as what people make it out to be. It's not good, but it's not all that bad. And I mean, the spare copies of the batteries aren't too badly priced. You can pick up some, off-brand ones and they still do the job. But I would have needed to make sure I carried at least 2 or 3 at most batteries whenever I brought this camera out. Whereas this guy, yes, I do have a spare battery, because you should always have a spare battery, but I feel so much more confident with going out with maybe just 1 battery and just knowing that it's going to last for a very long time. So battery life most definitely has been the one thing that I really wanted the A7III for. And when you have double the battery life, you also have double the card space. You have 2 memory card slots on here, both are SD, which is so handy too. So I never really had too much of a problem myself with having a camera with a singular card slot. I've used singular card slot cameras for years. The only other dual camera cards I had were the D7000 and the Fujifilm X-T2, but other than that, all the other cameras I've owned have been singular cards, and I've never had a memory card fail on me, knock on wood. But just knowing that I have 2 cards into this camera, that I've set this up to be RAW and JPEGs. One card does recording to RAW, the other does recording to JPEG, so that way if anything does fail, I can then just have another card that has it's all backed up and it's all there, so I have a bit more security. I'm not a big fan, this is quite niggly, I'm not a big fan that they flipped the memory card style, so that way that if you have the image, the front of the memory card, it goes that way, whereas on the A7II it goes that way, and I'm still trying to get used to that. So yeah, that's just a little niggly thing. I like that there's a lot more customization with the A7III. So Sony have always been quite infamous whenever it comes to their menu system, and there is a lot in this menu on the A7III, but there's a lot more room for customization, like with any of the custom keys or anything, compared to the A7II. Like, you can have certain things for photos, certain things for video, certain things for playing back your photographs, and it's just really handy to have so much more options available, because I have a button set up for my autofocus, for my drive, all those different things, and it's just so easy to click on. Also, when it comes to the buttons, you also have a dedicated AF on button, which can be set up for your back button autofocus, which I use quite a lot anyway, whereas you don't have that on the A7II. You have to sort of change that to a certain button. I have it on one of the sort of AF/MF buttons, whereas this has a dedicated back button autofocus option. You also have a little joystick that you can also play about with your autofocus points on there. You would have needed to hit the center button and move that all about. It's getting a bit of use to, for me, I have to say. I'm not a big fan of the joystick, but it is kind of handy to have it, but I'm not that big of a, I think if it was a bit more, if it had a bit more textile or anything to it, whereas on here, you don't have as much of a grip on the joystick, but it is nice to have it just to maneuver about, and it does make it just that little bit more easier instead of hitting buttons and moving left, right, up and down, so that way you can scroll along. The touch screen also comes into handy with those sorts of things. So this has a touch screen that you can use to tap to change your focus and drag along. So there's a lot more customization with the A7III and a few more additional features on it than what you would do on the A7 Mark II. So it's really handy to have so much more customization available and just so quick to be able to change these sorts of things. Okay, so now I swapped over to the A7 III, and you can probably tell already things are just a little bit more snappier. The autofocus is just constantly on my face here. It hasn't changed at all. Even whenever I did that transition, it just went straight to my face. You still have face detection on the A7 II. It's alright, it's still pretty good, not as great as what it would be on the A7 III, but it's still pretty good. And of course, whenever it comes to things like video, the A7 III will of course outweigh the 2, because it can do things like 4K and all like that. I don't really do much in regards to the video front. I just record in full HD with both cameras, so my settings are pretty much the same there. But go on to YouTube, check out all the different videographers that maybe use the 2 cameras side by side for video work if you are a videographer, but you still get a lot of additional benefits with the faster autofocus, better video quality, better sensor on there with the 3. So yeah, check that out if you want more video details. So I've said so many great things about the A7 III that I just feel like, you know, I'm really not giving this camera any justice. So what exactly makes the A7 II great compared to the A7 III? Well, you have the same sensor, so there's no additional changes other than the fact that the A7 III is backside illuminated, so it's better for lower light photography, but you still have that full frame CMOS sensor in here. Both of them are 24 megapixels too, so you still have the same sort of resolution, which is fantastic. Autofocus is still pretty good on this camera. Again, like I said at the start, you don't have as much in regards to the phase detection, but you still have a little bit there. And I've used this for lower light photography, concert photography, fast movements and all, and this still keeps up. You get 5 frames per second on here compared to the 10. 5 frames, still pretty good on here, I have to say. But this will still be a fantastic camera if you're wanting to get into things like concert photography or anything like that. Another similar feature that you have from the A7 II and the A7 III is that you have stabilization built into the camera. So you have 5-axis stabilization between the 2 cameras. I think the gyros and whatever the heck you call them are a little bit better on the A7 III, so it helps cut down on rolling shutter, but you still get in-body stabilization on the A7 II, so that way if you put a lens on, whether it's stabilized or not, who cares, it's stabilized within the camera, so you get much more steadier shots. So knowing that you have a camera that's about 800-900 pounds with the full axis stabilization, full frame and all in there, is just fantastic. Now the one thing that I have, this goes back to what I was saying about the joystick, is that what I have really liked compared to from the A7 II and the A7 III is that I actually kind of prefer the grip on the 2. The 3 is certainly a little bit bigger just because it's supporting the bigger battery, but there's a few more things in the way, like the joystick and all, whereas I'm kind of prefer the grip on the A7 II. There's a bit more for your thumb and all on there. I don't know what it is, I'm probably just still getting used to it, but I kind of prefer the grip on the A7 II, but you still get a really nice deep grip on here. So yes, I know there's a lot of differences with the A7 III, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't turn our nose up at the A7 II. This camera can still do quite a lot of stuff, and that's why I have been keeping it as my backup camera. I thought about maybe getting rid of it and trading it in so that way I just would have had the one, but no, I thought about just keeping it because that way I still have a similar sort of workflow. The raw files are all going to work the same, customization, the menus, all like that. So I just have this as my backup camera, and I still love this guy. This guy still does amazing results for me, still keeps up very well. Again, with the first half of this video I was using it for recording, so it still works really well. And I mean, price wise, yes, this camera is just under $2,000, whereas this is just under $1,000, so there is a big difference in price, but a lot of these sort of things that we've talked about play a big role. So I do kind of hope that this video was helpful for you, because these are 2 fantastic cameras and it is hard to know, well, should I spend the extra money or should I get the A7 II? Because the way I sit and think about it is, if you're really wanting to invest into your photography, like if you're a wedding photographer or anything like that, and you really want to push on forward, then I would spend the extra money and get the A7 III just to have those additional features of better battery, autofocus continuous, the 2 memory card slots, so you have a little bit more security and you feel a little bit more confident. However, if you feel like you want to enter into the mirrorless world and you maybe want to enter into getting into your first full frame camera, because that's how I felt with the A7I. That was my first mirrorless camera and my first full frame camera too. So if you feel like you're on that same sort of wavelength and you know the money is certainly not there, or you know you're just still working your way up into the camera, well, I would still look at the A7II. You're talking under £1,000 on here for the body only. It's maybe a little bit more if you want to get it with a lens. So it's still nice and affordable, but you still have an outstanding camera when you want to enter into full frame and mirrorless. So I would never turn my nose up at the A7II because it's still absolutely fantastic, and it's a lot of the reasons that I have talked about in this video is why I've been keeping this as my backup camera. Yeah, I do hope this video was helpful for you guys, because we're in 2021 right now. And this camera's been around for quite a long time, and the A7III has also been around for a number of years too. But there's reasons why they are still on the market and people are still buying them. And it's for a lot of the reasons that we've talked about in today's video. So if you use any of these cameras at all, whether you use the A7II as a main camera, A7III as a main camera, or you have both, let me know in the comments down below. Let me know some of your thoughts as to why you maybe enjoy using one of these cameras, why you own them. And if you did find this video very helpful too, again, just let us know down below. And while you're there, do like, share, subscribe, and hit the wee bell icon so that you can stay up to date with future videos. Again, it's always greatly appreciated that you guys come along and check out the content. You have no idea how much it means to me. But until then, folks, do take care of yourselves and enjoy the rest of your day.